the Sentinel Mindset.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic day. I have a very special guest today, and the way this whole situation happened is quite the story. But today, we're talking to Timea Nagy. Now, who is Timea? She's a globally known social advocate educator, executive producer, and best-selling author. And over the last 15 years, she has spoken about trauma worldwide. Her work has significantly raised awareness about human trafficking among first responders and the financial sector. Now, Timea recently embarked on a journey to discover science-based methods to heal unresolved traumas. And this groundbreaking discovery led to 2 years of intense research and study, ultimately testing these new healing modalities. Now, to her biggest surprise, it worked. She decided to spend the next 15 years talking about how to heal trauma to anyone who is guided to listen. Now, before I bring her on, the one thing I want to say is this. I was having a conversation with a client, and as we're talking, and this client used to be a police officer, and as we're talking, he starts describing Timea and her passion about helping first responders. And I'm like, wait a second, stop for a second. Forget the business right now. Stop for a second. I need to meet this person. So, Timea, welcome to the show.
It's such a pleasure to be here. I saw some of your episodes, so I know some of the finest and greatest chiefs were sitting in this very chair. So I cannot believe I'm actually sitting here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And I can't wait to dive into this topic because we put so much content about law enforcement and that would be our specific area of first responders. We get a lot of flack, a lot. And like, why? And even the media that we post, I read lots of the comments and there's a lot of hate in there. And usually it's like, defund the police or, anyone can be a police officer, or the one that I hate the most, they're overpaid, right? and to me, I would say they're not paid enough because of what they're required to do. And I absolutely love this initiative that you have called Heroes Rising. But before we get into that, why don't you tell me for yourself, why this passion that you share with myself, what is it for you that you want to do something for first responders?
Well, thank you very much for asking that. And yes, we definitely share the same passion. And what you're describing, the hatred that's happening all around the world, really, against first responders is what actually started this project for me. So I'll go back a little bit. I actually grew up in Hungary in a communism, and my mom was a police officer. She was a civilian officer, but back in the day in the 70s, even if you weren't like in uniform and stuff, you did things. You would help interrogating and a whole bunch of stuff. So I actually grew up in a police station.
Wow.
My uncles, my brothers, not by blood, but my family was policing, like police officers, firefighters, nurses. When I would be at home sick because my mom was a single mom, you would hear the door open and a uniform would come in with the chicken soup and a Tylenol and says, your mother said to take this and I have to wait till you... That's how I grew up. So it's really hard for me to hate police when it's my family. So that's number one. But unfortunately, many years later, I ended up being human trafficked into Canada. And I was a sex trafficked victim for 3 months. And at the time when nobody talked about human trafficking, nobody knew the science, nobody knew anything about human trafficking. So lucky me, I was trafficked into this amazing country because at least I got some help. The help of Canadian people, I was able to escape. I went back to Hungary and I went to the police at the time, not to my mom's police because I was very ashamed and embarrassed and scared. And I was also chased by the mafia. So it's a very complicated story and a long one too. But I went back to Hungary and at the airport I was taken by police officers because I traveled back home on a fake passport, and I told them everything about this human trafficking international ring. And here's an interesting part. You would think the police would have came to help me. They didn't. They actually took me away, and they abused me sexually.
This was in
Hungary.
Okay.
The reason why I want to say this, because I don't have blind spots for police because my mom was a cop. I know firsthand that there are bad apples in the family. And I know what that does to the good apples in the family. So I just want to say this right up front, which is why our initiative is going to be very honest about what are the faults of potentially some of the law enforcement engagements.
Right.
But that's not our focus. So that's my background. And when I I escaped from Hungary eventually because the mafia was after me and the police really didn't have an understanding at the time about what human trafficking is. So I got caught up in this between the police and mafia. So I escaped from Hungary and I came back to Canada and I was really just trying to find a new life without all that craziness. And I did. And so Canadians helped me. And 1 year after, I was working under the table, and it's actually really difficult to be illegal in Canada, believe it or not, because everybody is exploiting you. And I just had it. But I couldn't leave. I couldn't go back to Hungary because I would have been killed by the mafia. So eventually, I actually came forward and I went to the police. And the very first police officer that I met, his name was Michael Josefovic. And
what service?
Toronto Police.
Okay.
And I walked in and just know that by this time, it's almost a year and a half when I'm on the run. I haven't slept. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. Everybody is...
you have no trust whatsoever.
No trust whatsoever. But I'm exhausted. And I said, even if they arrest me and throw me in jail, at least there's 3 meals a day and at least I'm safe and I can get some sleep.
Wow.
So I went to meet this officer, and the first thing he did was he looked me in the eye, and he asked me how I'm doing. And I say this in trainings all around the world. That was the first time in my 21 year of life when somebody actually took 2 minutes out of their busy life, including my mother, and God rest her soul, and it is what it is, but she was a very busy woman and had mental health stuff. Mike was the first person in my life who looked me in the eye and just asked me, how are you doing?
Wow. Such a simple question, but so powerful to connect.
And absolutely. And I just felt this, oh my God, somebody actually sees me, not as an escort, not as a prostitute, not as a piece of meat, not as a product, not as a whatever, but a human being. How is that even possible? So we built a very, very strong bond. He took my statement, and we went to court against the Canadian party that was part of the trafficking ring. Well, the court lasted 6 years. So I'm in Canada with no family, no money, no support, barely speaking English. My only lifeline was Mike. So I wanted to prove it to him that he put all of his right effort into this right girl. And then he introduced me to an immigration officer. At the time, he was an immigration officer, Mario Catanazio. He also became like a big brother to me. So my next 2 to 3 years, during the darkest time of my life, when there was nobody around, I could call on these two day or night, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., when I had to go to the hospital or any problems I had, they were there for me. Nobody else.
Wow.
No social workers. The bank would deny me. The hospital would kick me out. Collectors would call me. Landlords are banging on my door. Nobody else was there for me but these two. It wasn't part of their job. Mario already transferred 5 times from that department. He never had to take my cause. Mike, he transferred. But 20 years later, Mike actually walked me down the aisle when I got married.
Wow.
That's how strong our bond is. And so fast forward 10 years after our stories and everything, human trafficking became a thing, and I became an advocate. And I started working with frontline workers, police, nurses, 911 callers, doctors, ambulance firefighters, when we were working on cases. And that's when I also saw the miracles that they do every single day and the sacrifices they make. And in the middle of this season, I had a victim in my car. It was 2010 when the big protests were happening and downtown Toronto police cars were on fire and everything. Here's a survivor of human trafficking who just left her abuser. I know very well what that feeling is. Finally, she's free. But she's not really free until she goes to the police, because no one can really protect her from these guys but the police, right? So we are in the car. We are driving to a safe house. I didn't know the protest was this bad and this big. We're driving through Toronto. And I'm keep telling her, girl, you gotta go to the police, man. Like, you have to go to the police. Like, I can't protect you. I can't drive around the city with you. Like, we gotta go to the police. And she's starting to go for it. And then we drive through the protest, and she looks over, and we literally caught a glimpse of people throwing beer bottles and all kinds of stuff at our officers, right? And she goes, you mean, and the officers can't do anything because they were given an order to stand down. And she goes, you mean those cops, those guys gonna protect me? Are you joking me? They're losers. And I was like, okay, I either gonna keep on advocating for human trafficking because there's so much to do, or I'm gonna advocate for first responders. And in that moment, I actually chose human trafficking because at the time, I was a nobody. I had nothing, and I had no resources. That was a really, really big animal to wrestle with. So I chose to be an advocate for the next 15 years or whatever. But today, that is going to change.
Let me ask you a question. Have you ever thought about what would have happened if you never met Mike?
Yeah, every single day I think about that, actually. I would have been lost completely. I would have been on a run for a very, very long time.
Right. And see, the reason why I asked that question is because Mike's a police officer.
Yeah.
He's a first responder.
Yeah.
And you know, again, I think a lot of times in any industry, forget just policing or law or, you know, first responders, any industry in the world, you always have bad apples, right? But for whatever reason, you know, in law enforcement, they seem to become the majority, right? You know, and to me, this, like, one of the things that, again, that we were talking about earlier was, you know, there's so many incredible police officers like Mike that are here to help someone, they're doing this because like behind me, you'll see this thing called the protector's DNA, because there are people in our world that they actually have this thing inside them, and that is to help other people. They just haven't identified that they're protectors. Like, you know, I tell this to people, you're a protector. What do you mean? I mean, you help people. It's in your blood. It's in your system. And I think everybody in this world has that. They just have to tap into it. Because to me, like, the innocence of a child that comes into this world, you know, they learn, their environments change, their minds shift, but really, like, life is about helping. It's about, like, it's becoming as a unit, and it breaks my heart to see the world in its state and how it is. But I just say, like, we need to highlight these stories. That's why when I started to read about Heroes Rising, and I'm like, this is incredible. This is in line with what it is. And to highlight the goodness of people, I want to say one quick thing to me. There's a gentleman named Mohammed who has a company called Goodable. And he used to be a journalist with CNN, with CBC. And, you know, really at the end of the day, he said, I was involved in telling news. It was always negative, always negative. What if we can highlight the good of people, the goodness of what's going on in the world? And he created this incredible app called Goodable, where it gives you daily doses of goodness, okay? I want to introduce you to him because, to me, like, his whole foundation is about that. And there's incredible stories that police do, just like yours. So I want to know if you can maybe just give us a little bit more about what you're trying to do here and provide awareness, which I know is an uphill battle.
It is. So first of all, I just want to comment on what you said. The problem is, as you said, law enforcement is an easy target to pick on. And I have talked to a lot of journalists and writers and news writers, and they said, yeah, I'm sorry, but it's an easy target, and it's the best way to get clickbaits. But what people don't understand is that it's in their name. They enforce the law. They're not the one who, you know, broke the society.
Right.
It's not their fault that there's racism. It's not their fault that there's human trafficking. It's not their fault that there's homelessness. They're not allowed to have an opinion. They work for the government, so they're not allowed to speak up. So one of the things that I always say is, if to the public specifically, have you noticed that there's only one media person that comments for law enforcement or firefighters or whoever? That's because the individual officers or doctors or nurses, they're not allowed to go out and actually share their thoughts.
They don't have a voice.
They don't have a voice. So what happened? How did we get here? For the last 15 years, we are selling stories that are not entirely true. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be very honest with you. A friend of mine's brother just got actually shot by Toronto police. And he's a social worker. And he also put up the story the way it happened. Here are the facts. Mm-hmm. My brother had mental illness. Here are the facts. He had a knife. Mm-hmm. Yes, he was having an episode, and he was shot by Toronto police. That's news reporting. And he's not even a reporter, right? Mm. I can't imagine right now his most favorite people on the planet is the police. But he, even in his darkest hour, had that in him to report the facts. But that's not what the media did. So what happened? So 15 years ago, media started bashing the police because it was good clickbait. Let's face it, easy target, perfect front page stuff, right? 15 years later, an entire generation grew up on that narrative. And there is no other narrative to balance it out. They can't speak up. What are they going to do? Hey, they're going to do a selfie. I just had a good save.
Right.
No, they can't speak up. And it's not just police, same with firefighters or doctors or nurses, right? So what I would like to do with this initiative, it's called Heroes Rising. I want to start changing the negative narrative into positive, and also have very honest conversations about what is a problem in the current affairs, right? Mm-hmm. And every chief that you have on your show will be the first to admit we do have work to do. Nobody says we don't have work to do, but you can't have work done when you put the knife at each other's throat all the time. Having conversations, and the defund police, behind the defund police is, I understand what the idea behind it is. And in some ways, I think programs like having a mental health nurse going with the doctor, fantastic initiative, or have social workers when they talk to troubled youth, great initiative. But again, we need to make sure that everybody is safe. Long story short, mm-hmm. I think start having conversations instead of constantly fighting is what I would like to do. And my project, Heroes Rising, which is basically a movement, will do that. And the way I want to start conversations, I want to tell stories, real stories from the survivor's perspective, survivors and individuals that were impacted by trauma that can come forward and nominate their heroes.
That's fantastic.
Who saved them and give them a second chance in life, just like Mike did for me.
Absolutely. You know, the funny thing is, I mean, I say the word funny, but, you know, people will say things like, and I've read comments, I've heard people say, well, they're not heroes. They get paid to do this. The reality is, if someone is risking their life before another, like you recently saw what happened in the U.S. where Trump, was shot at, and then you see his Secret Service start using their bodies to protect him. They're not there to stand and a piece of paper is going to hit them. They're there prepared to take a bullet, right? Well, you don't call that a hero? That someone's going to lose their life for you? You know what I mean?
Look, I completely agree with you. What I realized is we didn't just get here out of nowhere. That narrative was put out for 15 years, which is why you get an individual who has a comment like that. I met a young producer about this project about a year ago. Young producer. And so we told her about this project, and she goes, this was her reaction, but isn't cops are like bad? And I'm like, wow, where to start? And she's in that generation where she grew up on it. So I could either start arguing with her when I know that the narrative in her head is being implemented there and planted there as a seed for the last 15 years, or I'll just spend my time and energy to start telling real stories to the public, one after another, so the public can actually start changing their mind and make an informed decision. Another thing is, I don't like to too much, bash the public. It's really not their fault. They just ate what was served to them.
Right.
And so that's just how we got here. So I always say this, if you want to change a system, you are part of the system. So go and do something about it, which is what I'm doing right now.
No, absolutely. So in order for you to kind of make Heroes Rising become a reality, what are some obstacles that you're facing right now that if someone is listening can help?
Yeah. So before I tell you the obstacles, I just want to give you like a 30-second elevator speech.
Let's hear it.
The first step to Heroes Rising, which is a movement to change the narrative from negative to positive, to make our first responders feel better and raise their profile in the public. Number one step is we are organizing an Oscar-style national, potentially televised award ceremony where our heroes will be nominated by the survivors or individuals impacted by trauma.
Recognize, yeah.
Exactly. We're going to have all the categories, and we're going to have celebrities, national hockey players, basically the entire community coming together and show their great appreciation for our first responders who are risking their life every single day so that you and I can sleep at night.
That's right.
And so the idea behind this show is to unite Canada for just 2 hours. Have everybody in front of the screen, have the firefighters at the station watching one of their friends being recognized from New Brunswick to Vancouver to Quebec to whatever. Police, nurses, doctors feel good about themselves and hear the words that they haven't heard in a long time. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So that's our first step.
It's the job that first responders do. Depending on what kind of first responder you are, you may never ever hear that word "thank you." I'll give you an example. Firefighters have that reputation of they come in their like shiny red truck, they have a very different public perception, where police is the complete opposite. And I'll tell you this, I don't know if there's any data to support this other than my conversations with police on a regular basis, but the hatred for police has actually gone through the roof. And I say the respect level in the sense of being called names and, attending a situation and you're faced with negativity off the get-go. It's hard. See, the thing is, people forget that behind that uniform is a human being that laughs, that cries, that likes movies, that eats similar foods. And that's the part that people really understand. They're human beings, right? And as humans, what happened that it's gone to that level? So the fact that you're able to do something, to kind of come with that concept of the recognition, I love that idea. I really love that idea.
I appreciate that. And you know what? Like you said, they'll never go up and recognize themselves,
Right.
And even when they get recognized by their own agency, I spoke to so many of them. They go to these award ceremonies kicking and screaming that they don't want to have a recognition because of exactly what you said. They are the protectors. It's in their DNA. However, everybody have their limit. Mm-hmm. And what I just want to say is that there's another side to this. There's a recruitment crisis.
That's right.
Amongst first responders.
Yes.
So all I'm going to tell your audience and everybody who's a hater, I understand that you have your reasons to hate. Everybody have their own life, their own interactions, and you have every right to feel the way you feel. But I'm going to ask you this. Who do you going to call at 3 a.m. when somebody is breaking your door?
That's right.
And if you have a problem with the system, then join boards, like become a volunteer, step in their shoes for a day, write letters. If you have reasons to believe that the broken system, then come along and trying to change it. Help. It's not really helpful to sit on a couch and throw out hateful comments, though I understand, because hateful comments come from pain. So whoever is commenting like that could be another version of Timea who was raped by police, right? I could spend the rest of my life hating police. But then what happens when I need them again, right? So my last thought I just want to say is there's a recruitment crisis. So we can keep bashing and bashing and bashing them until there is no first responders. And then what are we going to do? And the numbers are already on the wall. You wait 45 minutes on a 911 call. When on earth that was okay? Right now in Vaughan, it's 45 minutes. Sometimes a friend of mine was on the call, on a wait with 911 because there was not enough people, because they can't handle it. There's not enough resources and there's no new recruits. Policing, there's not enough Toronto police officers. Now the money is getting withdrawn from them from the budget, from what I heard. Peel Police was begging for increase. Their population is growing and it's less police officers in every region. So people don't understand when an officer goes out for their daily, tour or shift, they doing 5 times as much job as they used to. So when they are 2 hours late from your call, they are late because they haven't had lunch, they haven't checked in with their kids, because they're filling up for 5 other people's position, because people can't take it anymore. So that's why I'm doing Heroes Rising. It's for 2 reasons. One is because our first responders need help and simply just need to hurt a simple thank you. Let's start there. But also to educate the public on the reality of what's going on. And they need to stop this silliness, because as of tomorrow, we're not going to have first responders to badge. And what are you going to put on the uniform?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very real thing. I was talking to an individual, part of their jobs are required to provide certification for people wanting to get in. And he was telling me that there's like a 50% decline, right, of people coming on. And, if you're someone that really wants to get onto the service and you're hearing stories about, imagine this, you wake up in the morning, you have a nice breakfast, you go to the gym, and then you're like getting ready to go to work. And as you're coming to work, you're being yelled at. You're getting name calling. That's going to impact your self-worth potentially. It's going to wreck your day. Negativity will affect it. And you're getting that through the course of the day. Then you finish and you go back home and you got to deal with it again the next day and the next day and the next day. And the reality is people will break down, right? And that's what's happening. People are saying, I don't want to do this.
I'm done.
Yeah.
I want to give you one more example, because I don't want to just focus on police. I have a lot of paramedic friends, and we did a research with paramedics. So I talked to one of this girl and I told her what I'm trying to do, and she started crying on the phone. It's like, are you serious?
She's a paramedic?
She's a paramedic.
Wow.
She goes, you want to do this for us? She goes, I don't know when was the last time I heard a simple thank you. I'm like, well, what do you mean? She goes, well, just the other day, I was supposed to be done after 8 hours. I got pulled in for another shift because, somebody decided not to show up anymore. They just couldn't come into work. So I'm doing a 12 hours. I haven't ate yet. I haven't stopped. And so me and my partner got in line at Tim Hortons, and 2 women started yelling at us. Oh, on steady dime, just chilling out, getting coffee. So she goes, so we left. We didn't eat. I didn't eat until I got home. And I'm like, yeah, that needs to stop.
Absolutely.
So when I keep hearing those stories, I'm like, well, you asked me what I need money. I need sponsors and supporters and donors. Because it's a great idea, great concept. We already had first-time investors in the first round, and we got the project up and running as far as we did, but we're going to need some money to make this work.
Okay. How do people, if they want to be part of this movement and they want to give where can they visit so they can do this?
Sure. Please visit heroesrising.com. Can you look at what it says?
For sure.
I know
I'll
you
pull
guys
it up.
can edit. Is it .com or .ca?
I'll do it right now. But so...
and then I'll tell, it's not just money. They can, there's other ways to support. So I'll just say that too.
Okay. We'll get the link on this and we'll put it on the bottom. Okay. I will make sure we have the link on there, the proper link.
Okay. So I'm just going to start there and
of course.
I'm going to finish that
Yeah,
sentence.
no worries.
So if you guys want to support, just visit us online. The link is over here, Heroes Rising. There's various ways. Please just contact us. Let us know what you're thinking. We are always looking for advisors as well. Obviously, we are looking for sponsors, donors. But whatever you got in mind, if you want to just spread the word, get us on your podcast, the more the merrier. So.
I love this. HeroRisings.ca. Okay. And again, as soon as you log in, it'll break it right down. And I love it. Again, I see it right here. The national ceremony honoring the unsung heroes of our society. If you were going to have it in an optimal world, when would you like to see this happen? This first one here, because I know there's a lot of time and organization to put into place. Plus, you're going to have to get submissions from every services.
Yeah, ideally, we want to get the first one up and running next year.
Okay.
Potentially early fall.
Okay, so if you cannot give financially, but you also want to give in your network, in your resource, in your time, is that something that you're open to?
100%. Or if you have any ideas, or if you have a really great network, anybody you want us to, if you have a great network, individuals that are believers and can become supporters, please find us. We would love to talk to you guys.
Amazing. I actually love this. I think we can do so much. Timea, I really think right now this is actually needed. It's so needed. And I agree with what you said earlier. Too many people, I tell this to our staff here in our organization, if there is a problem, getting together in a huddle and just all complaining and talking about it, somebody has to break and say, I have a solution. Or why don't we find a solution? Because if not, you're just going to be going in a circle, talking about the same problem over and over again. It's going to be a loop, right? Absolutely. So the key is to break it. And at the end of the day, I think some onus and responsibility needs to be put to the public to say, hey, look, if there's issues, what do you think would be a good idea to do something? Like recently I heard, they're getting funding right now for more helicopters in the sky, okay? And I know with I think it's Toronto or PP and Durham are going to get them. And we actually did an episode which is releasing soon where we actually went on York's helicopter. And they were stating, and I saw it firsthand, because we were actually on a call when it happened, completely by fluke. But it's such an invaluable service to be able, yes, it costs a couple of $1 million, but it's able to do so much jobs because you're able to do it from the sky in a very quick manner. So again, I love everything that you're trying to achieve and put together, and I want to see this come through. So I want to commit publicly to help this cause here, okay? And whatever we can do, and we will do it. It's going to happen, okay? And our next episode will be the first accomplishment that takes place. Any last words?
Thank you. Honestly, thank you so much. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for everything that you're doing. And yeah, thank you. And for those of you who are watching this and hate the show, I just don't know why you're watching a show that's about law enforcement that you hate so much. So right. Obviously, you want to engage and you want to actually communicate something. So my suggestion to your haters is to maybe just pick up the phone or send you an email and say, hey, this is actually my real problem.
Right.
And what do you think? Maybe have a conversation. Maybe you have maybe that's where it starts.
Yes.
My thing is I just want to start conversations.
Okay. I just got to say this. This will be my second time talking with you. And I just have to say, I really like your energy. I love your passion, your genuineness. And I know we didn't go deep into your story, but I will say this. I appreciate everything that you've done. And I want to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Have a fantastic day, everyone. Again, I want you to visit heroesrising.ca and act today, everyone. Have a fantastic day and stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me in today's podcast. This podcast was created for protectors in the fields of law enforcement, executive protection, security, and anyone looking to level up their mindset. If you are learning from this podcast and you're enjoying it, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Sentinel Mindset. That's a zero-cost way to support us. In addition, please subscribe to the podcast both on Spotify and Apple. And on both Spotify and Apple, you can leave us up to a 5-star review. If you have questions for me or comments about the podcast or guests you would like me to consider on the Sentinel Mindset, please post all comments on YouTube. I do read all the comments. Please also check out our sponsors, thearenatoronto.com. The Arena was created to help all those in the fields of law enforcement, security, and all that achieve their fitness goals. I want to thank our producer, Matthew Doyle, and creative support, Jaslene Singh, who help me with this podcast every week. We value your feedback and are here to support you. Tune into the Sentinel Mindset every week where we look in the mirror to make real changes and explore what it takes to achieve greatness in your craft.
This podcast is brought to you by Executive Protection Lifestyle Canada. Make sure to drop by next week and don't forget to subscribe.